Public hearing for July 30th to order. Stand for pledge allegiance.
Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let me first start by saying the City and Town Development Act is not tied to Renaissance in any way. Like any other entity, Renaissance potentially could use this in the future to get grants. This has been something that the city has been doing for 30 plus years. Renews it, I believe, every 5 years. And even ESPN way back when used this to get a significant grant, I understand. That being said, I'm going to ask Justin Malley to come up, give a few words on what this is all about, and then we'll get into the public.
Good evening, folks. How are you? What I'd like to do is...
Your Honor, can I have you just hold on a second? The recording system wasn't starting up,
Ready?
so where's my second? Thank you.
What I'd like to do is just give a summary of the Act and how it pertains to the city and economic development. So I'll read right from what I forwarded to you all. To help combat high unemployment, blight, and other negative economic conditions in Connecticut communities, the state of Connecticut developed the City and Town Development Act in 1975. The Act grants certain powers to a municipality upon adoption and ratification. Municipalities may perform several processes to stimulate economic development, including acquiring development property, selling development property, making loans or grants to developers, offering tax abatements, and more. Benefits under the Act have traditionally been used for development outside the city's enterprise zone and also for development not involving manufacturing, as these two areas already enjoy established benefit programs coordinated by either the state or the city. One benefit the city could offer developers through the Act is the opportunity to borrow money at a lower rate than they might be able to qualify for on their own. For instance, the developer might borrow money using the interest rate for which the city would qualify, but the city has no liability or obligation. Even if the borrower defaults, it's not reflected in any way on Bristol. The Act can also make available tax abatements for developers of new construction projects. The tax abatements are similar to those offered to businesses in the enterprise zone or to manufacturers applying under the state's Urban Jobs Program. One beneficiary of tax abatements through this Act is the daycare / preschool facility owned by ESPN on Enterprise Drive. The important thing to note here, like many things that we do in the BDA, City Council approval is required before the city can execute incentives with a developer under this Act.
Thank you. Any questions for Justin? Thank you, Justin. Okay. Richard, and I'm sorry, it looks like... Average, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. Name and address for the record.
I'm Richard Average. My address is 60 Michigan Avenue, Bristol, Connecticut. And I'm aware of your comment that the Broad Act and the Renaissance redevelopment downtown are related but not the same. But my concern at this point is primarily about the redevelopment of the downtown area, I guess commonly called Renaissance. I believe I'm not alone, and you know that, in saying I'm very unhappy with the way that redevelopment has been conducted from the very beginning. I realize politicians are elected to represent us and make some decisions for us, but that doesn't mean that multi-million-dollar decisions time after time have to be made behind closed doors with the public left in the dark. When you start asking questions, you get very vague answers with very vague data. At this stage of the game, all I know is that the actual use that will probably evolve is in no way related to what we were originally told would happen. As far as the cost is concerned, the cost to taxpayers is already nothing like we were originally told. It has just climbed and keeps going with no end in sight. I think it's time to say that it's time to put this on the referendum, clearly worded, binding resolution. Please let the public be heard and let them speak and act accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sean Roost. Sean, on here it says right, you're going to speak to referendum, but you need to speak to what's on the agenda tonight, which is this, okay?
Oh, it's on.
Thank you.
It's part of it.
I know you'll tie it all in somehow. So you know.
I don't have to. It's a state statute, and it's already been tied in. I read the resolution that is part of the act that relates Renaissance to it, actually, because we're talking about housing and blight in the downtown. So it's not, even though the ballot idea is two separate issues, the issues are intertwined and cannot be separated. The state of Connecticut ensured that that be the case, and that's why we're here tonight. All right, I have a resolution of my own. It says, being as that an unreasonable amount of residents in the city of Bristol are subject to hardship as median income declines as the cost of living is escalating. Being that a great number of homeowners are having difficulty making their mortgage payments and are at risk of foreclosure. Being that the number of homes that are unoccupied has continued to increase as outlined in the City of Bristol's demographics report provided by ESRI, that's on the city's website. Being that the state of Connecticut has considerably increased its taxation on its citizens, furthering increasing the decline in home ownership in the state of Connecticut. Being that further decline in home ownership due to increased taxation in the city of Bristol may lead to a decline in tax revenues, leaving the city to increase its reliance on state subsidies. Being that the state of Connecticut's economy is in distress due to excessive debt and already has relinquished funding to its municipalities. That's regarding unfunded mandates. Being that the proposed ballot question does not reflect the city's plan as described in the resolution, and this is the biggest issue that I have with this. Being that the plan affects taxpayers disproportionately by region, which conflicts the state of Connecticut's Constitution in Section 1. Being that some city leaders have claimed that our charter does not allow for a referendum regarding debt for housing. Being that the intended use for the Connecticut Redevelopment Act will not lead to job creation, as these funds would be better suited. And being that this is a blank check for the city of Bristol to incur $200 million worth of debt. That's 5% of the city's assets. My math might be wrong, but I know it's pretty darn close. Maybe none of you have that intention, but you all may be leaving office before long, and you don't know who's going to be voted in. I've seen cities take on tens and millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars for a comprehensive plan which hinges on transportation in Bristol if we use a regional plan. I don't take issue with the West End plan that designates that we have a lot of blighted housing as indicated in the resolution that is part of this act. But I do take issue with the fact that I feel that taxpayers are being excluded from the details of this. To say that we don't have a say in it is contradictory to the reason why we're here tonight. If you read in the Redevelopment Act, all right, it says there's a mandatory referendum section. It says that, and it has to do with debt and housing and blight verbatim in it, which is the reason why we're using Renaissance's plan for mixed-use housing here in the city. I find it really important that the resolution that is going to be read matches the ballot question. The ballot question is saying that we're using this for economic development so that we can decrease joblessness and promote economic growth, all right? But the resolution says that we're going to use the Redevelopment Act because we have a lot of blight. They're not the same thing. It's almost like there's a question that's been drafted for the ballot that everyone's going to say yes to. Who's going to vote no to borrowing an amorphous amount of money, who knows how much it's going to be, to create jobs? Probably not anybody. Only the well-informed people that actually realize how these two things are associated. You you need to put on the ballot that what the money's going to be used for. It's going to be to replenish our low-income housing stock or affordable housing stock or something like that. If you don't, I'm going to fight you tooth and nail between now and November. And you have to maintain the respect of your citizens, and you're not going to do that if your question says one thing and your resolution says something different. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. All do you approve?
All the approve 126 Frederick Street. I think the Bristol taxpayers have had enough. We drive to Boston, spend $5.5 million to buy them all, okay? Then we tear it down, it costs us money, which I don't know how much. I think that's our fair share. No more giving money to them all. Let's draw the line. Think of the taxpayers. If these people can't do a good job without borrowing from the city, put a stop to it. I think it's drawing the line. Add it up, Ken. $5.5 million. We drive to Boston to buy something? Ridiculous, okay? You're a real estate guy. Would you do that to buy them all? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Is there a sign-in sheet?
We've already signed in, but you're welcome to speak. That was the last one we had on the sheet. Name and address for record, sir.
My name is Jim Ritchie. I've been a resident of Bristol for over 60 years.
Excuse me, can you have your address?
27 Matilda Drive, Bristol, Connecticut. Couple of things. I've been following this on and off through news. I've been to a couple of these hearings, and I've not come up to speak. Ms. Zappo made a statement that really got me angry. That we elected you to lead. That's a misnomer. You were elected to serve the city. And the city is not just the physical properties, but it's the residents of this town. We are the ones you are being held accountable to. There's been enough discussion on this, and it's been so close that to eliminate any bias, this all should be put on a binding referendum at the November ballot, whether we continue with Bristol Rising, this particular group, and this getting this taxpayer money to do the revitalization or blight. Because no matter what, it's not just coming out of the tax we pay to the city. Even though we're getting it through the state, I pay taxes to the state. I pay taxes to the federal government. So all these taxes are hitting me directly as a resident. I think it's time to put an end to this and get rid of a group who can't meet its goals. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Does someone have a sign-in sheet? Can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion made second. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Now we are going to start the special meeting of the Bristol City Council on July 30th at 6:44 p.m. Item number 1.
Item number 1 is to approve placing the question concerning continuation of the Connecticut City and Town Development Act on the November 4th, 2014 election ballot and to take any action as necessary. And there is a resolution to read.
Someone want to care to read resolutions?
I can read. To adopt the resolution enabling the City of Bristol to place the referendum question, shall the City of Bristol approve the City Council resolution dated July 30th, 2014 that adopts the Connecticut City and Town Development Act, which grants additional authority to aid and promote industrial and other forms of economic development on the November 4th, 2014 election ballot, and to waive the reading of the resolution, but to include it as part of the minutes.
Do I have a second? Second. Just let me state again that this has nothing to do with Renaissance, this resolution. This is for the City and Town Development Act. Any discussion? Motion made and seconded. Resolution starting on my far right.
Yes.
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 Chair votes yes, and motion passes. Item number 2.
To authorize the preparation of explanatory text for the question regarding the City and Town Development Act on the November 4th, 2014 ballot and to take any action as necessary. And that is just simply the motion is to authorize the explanatory text.
Motion made. Do I second?
Second.
Motion made second. Discussion.
I have a question. I think that Mr. Rest raised an interesting point from a citizen standpoint about how the language is created, and I didn't know if there was anybody who could address some of that based on the resolution that we adopted and how we get to that point based on the powers that are authorized under the Act. Maybe a little bit of explanation.
Attorney Lacy?
Yes, Mayor. Historically, it's been a collaborative effort between the department involved, which would be Mr. Malley in Economic Development, our office, and then we always go to the town clerk and we always go to the town clerk and we craft some language. I've crafted it in the past. I believe Teresa's helped out with it on numerous occasions. In this particular case, Mr. Malley's input will be important. I don't know if that helps.
The way it's created, though, you draw from the authority given under the state to write the language.
Correct, and it's a mutual explanation of what the powers of the Act are. It's try to make it simple and understandable.
Has it varied from every 5 years when you've done it before for any particular reason, or is the language typically the same?
In all candor, we haven't had an explanatory text when Mr. Rosenthal put this forward the previous 3 times. We thought that, and I think I'll give Teresa the credit, it would be important, which is allowed under statute, to create an explanatory text because it can be a little bit of a difficult issue for voters to understand. It's a very technical act.
And so the explanatory text is going to be circulated ahead of the election as it's typically been done when there's other questions. It's not just going to be available that day.
My understanding is to be on file in the town clerk's office. I don't know how else it's circulated, frankly.
I do. It has to be in the public newspaper within 14 days of it being passed, so that's 14 days from today.
That would be the actual act itself. The full text,
That would be the resolution.
right, the full text of the resolution that was passed, which is about 3 pages long.
Right.
Is what would have to go into the newspaper.
Thank you.
Under this,
I think so.
through the chair, under the circumstances, because there seems to be interest in this resolution, might it make sense to read the whole resolution that we waived? I mean, we generally waive reading because we want to move meetings along and we want people to get home for dinner. I don't mind reading the, entire text of the resolution if that might help.
Thank you.
This is the entire resolution which we waived reading a few minutes ago. Proposed resolution for referendum question on the ballot for the municipal election held November 4th, 2014 regarding continuation of the City and Town Development Act. Resolution of the City Council and the City of Bristol enabling the City of Bristol to assume all powers and obligations authorized under the Connecticut City and Town Development Act, Chapter 114 of the General Statutes of Connecticut, and reserving said powers and obligations of the City Council of the City of Bristol. Whereas on August 8, 1975, the Connecticut General Assembly passed and the Governor signed the City and Town Development Act, Public Act 75-2 of the July 1975 special session of the General Assembly, hereinafter referred to in this resolution as the Act, and is amended to date. And whereas, in order to exercise the powers conferred under the Act for a period which cannot exceed 5 years, the City Council of the City of Bristol, hereinafter referred to as the City Council, must find and determine by resolution that such conditions exist as described in the Act. And whereas, as further conditions precedent to exercise of the powers conferred under the Act, such resolution may only be adopted after public hearing thereof, upon at least 5 days' notice, published at least once in a newspaper of general circulation within the City of Bristol, and upon adoption, such resolution must be submitted to the electors of the City of Bristol at either a special election or at a regular municipal election, if such regular municipal election is held more than 60 days, but not more than 120 days after the adoption of such resolution. And whereas no action in the exercise of any powers granted under the provisions of the Act can be undertaken by the City Council without the approval of each such action by the City Council, which approval must be by separate resolution adopted in accordance with the Act. And whereas any action taken by the City of Bristol under the provisions of the Act which require the issuance of bonds secured by general fund revenues, secured bonds may not exceed 5% of the grand list, are subject to a referendum if more than 5% of the electors so petition. And whereas the ability to exercise the powers conferred upon the City of Bristol by the Act is of key importance for the revitalization of the City of Bristol, and whereas it is in the public interest that the resolution required under the provisions of the Act, as a condition precedent to the exercise of the powers conferred by the Act, be submitted to the electors of the city at the next regular election, and whereas notice of this resolution has been placed on record at the office of the city clerk for public inspection, and whereas a summary of this resolution and notice of the public hearing upon this resolution has been published in a newspaper of general circulation within the City of Bristol at least 5 days and not more than 14 days before the aforesaid public hearing. And whereas a public hearing upon said resolution has been held in accordance with the provisions of the Act. It is therefore, hereby resolved by the City Council of the City of Bristol that based upon the testimony at the aforesaid public hearing, materials submitted in support of this resolution, and the general knowledge of the members of this City Council, it is hereby found and determined that such conditions as referenced in the Act exist. Number one, that an unreasonable number of residents of the City of Bristol are subject to hardships in finding employment and adequate, safe, and sanitary housing. 2, that conditions of blight and deterioration exist in the City of Bristol. 3, that private enterprise is not meeting such need for housing, employment, and the reduction of blight and deterioration. 4, that the need for employment and adequate, safe, and sanitary housing will be lessened and the City of Bristol will be revitalized by the exercise of the powers granted under the Act. 5, that adequate provisions shall be made for the payment of the cost of acquisition, construction, operation and maintenance and insurance of all development property. 6, that a feasible method exists and shall be utilized for the relocation into safe and sanitary dwellings of comparable rent of families and individuals displaced as a consequence of the exercise of any power granted under the Act, and such families and individuals shall not suffer disproportionate injuries as a result of action authorized by the Act for the public benefit. 7, that development property shall not be acquired or disposed of without due consideration of the environmental and economic impact of such acquisition or disposition and the adequacy of existing or proposed municipal services. And 8, that the acquisition or disposition of all development property shall advance the public interest, general health, safety and welfare, and development, growth, and prosperity of the City of Bristol. Be it therefore resolved that prior to the City Council actions taken in accordance with the provisions of the Act to issue bonds or notes, to establish reserve funds, or to exempt in whole or in part development properties from municipal property taxes, the City of Bristol must provide its written recommendation on each such action. And be it further resolved that it is hereby found and declared that anything contained in this resolution to the contrary notwithstanding, it is the intention of this Council that by adopting this resolution, it is conferring upon the City of Bristol, subject to approval of a majority of the persons voting on this resolution at the next regular municipal election, all the authorities, powers, rights, and obligations conferred upon municipalities under the provisions of the Act, and that upon approval of this resolution by a majority of persons voting on this resolution as aforesaid, the City of Bristol will have sufficiently complied with the Act so as to be able to exercise all the powers conferred upon municipalities under the Act. And be it further resolved that the City Clerk of the City of Bristol and the registrars of the voters are directed to take any and all steps necessary to place this resolution on the ballot at the next regular municipal election held subsequently to the adoption of this resolution in accordance with the provisions of the Act and Section 9-369 of the Connecticut General Statutes, 1958 revision, as amended, including but not limited to warning electors, preparing ballot labels, holding the referendum, and canvassing the vote on this resolution. And be it further resolved that this resolution shall become effective for a period of 5 years upon its approval by a majority of persons voting on this resolution at the next regular municipal election held subsequent to the adoption of this resolution by the council. Now, therefore, it is resolved to place the following question relative to the continuation of the former adopted Connecticut City and Town Development Act on the ballot at the municipal election to be held on November 4th, 2014. Shall the City of Bristol approve the City Council resolution dated July 30th, 2014 that adopts the Connecticut City and Town Development Act, which grants additional authority to aid and promote industrial and other forms of economic development?
Thank you. Any other discussion?
I have a question. What happens if the question's not approved?
Well, I suppose the short answer, not to flip it, is that the city does not then have the powers conferred under the Act. So municipal powers are very constrained under Connecticut General Statute 7148 that kind of gives you a laundry list of what you can do. These powers go beyond the normal powers to regulate streets, borrow money. It gives us powers to actually do additional things to promote industry, housing, commerce.
So would the impact be felt at BDA?
It would be one less arrow in BDA's quiver. It's been used historically throughout the state to grant manufacturers, I think most often, it's been used to aid manufacturing, to grant manufacturers certain tax incentives, particularly in the property area, to encourage development of new plant and arguably new jobs. Also gives us the power to lend money directly, power that we don't currently, well, we wouldn't have if the Act didn't pass. And as I say, historically in Bristol, we've only used it once, and that was to help ESPN. If we didn't have it, we just wouldn't have that available in a very competitive market.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
I think I'd just like to point out, Your Honor, that for anybody in the community that hears about this conversation later, if you're somebody that's interested in making sure that Bristol can compete economically, you're interested in seeing industry growth here and commercial growth here, then the powers conferred under this Act are something that you should support, because the powers conferred under this Act, as Attorney Lacey actually kind of artfully just demonstrated for us, act as an arrow in BDA's quiver. The Business Development Authority needs tools that are made available to them, especially now as Bristol tries to grow, especially with all the different projects, not just in downtown, but all across our city, are trying to gain roots and continue their growth. So I would encourage members of the community to support this next November when it comes up on the ballot, regardless of your opinions on the Renaissance project, because they are basically unrelated.
Any other discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes.
Councilor Brown?
Oh, that wasn't a resolution. No, we just read the resolution. We were voting on the motion.
Right, on the motion.
Okay. Motion to adjourn. So moved.
Second.
Motion made, seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Have a good night.
That's it.